so we are taking a trinomial and we are breaking it into two binomials. But the difference is today there is a leading coefficient on what we're factoring, even after you take out the greatest common factor. So our first step is to always look for the greatest common factor, but we're not going to be able to get x squared by itself. There's going to be a coefficient to x squared. There will be a coefficient. So this is for trinomials. With a leading coefficient. Even after GCF. So yes, you should look to see, is there a greatest common factor? Always look to see if there's a greatest common factor. But there's going to be a leading coefficient even after you factor. All right, so this method, and there are a couple methods, I think this one tends to make the most sense, is called Xbox. It's called Xbox because we make an X in the box. So I'm going to show you the steps, then we're going to write out the steps, then we're going to practice the steps. So you make an X, and it needs to be big enough that you can write in the spaces. And then we make a box, which is really a grid. An X box sounds catchier than X grid. All right, so this is an organizational tool for us to factor. This is an organizational tool for us to factor. It works every single time. Here we go. Up here in the top, you're going to do ax squared, which is the first term, times c, which is the last term. Ax squared times c. Then down at the bottom, you're going to put bx. You're going to put the factors here. This is just an organizational tool. This is to organize you, because we need organization in our lives when we're doing these problems especially. In this spot, always in this spot, you're going to put ax squared. In this spot, you're going to put c. And in these two spots, you're going to put factors. So here's our X. Here's our box. And I'm going to draw arrows down. And I'm going to draw arrows across. And then we're going to write the directions. Again, this is an organizational tool to keep us organized while we're factoring. All right, so here's what we're doing. Number one, in the X portion, you are looking for factors of ax squared times c that have a sum of bx, or b. You're looking for factors of A times C that have a sum of B. Factors of A times C that have a sum of B. Does that sound familiar? What did we do yesterday? What were the notes yesterday? What did we look for yesterday? Lucy? Factors of C that have a sum of B. And technically, yesterday, did we find factors of A times C? Because what's A? No, what's A? What's A? 1. The coefficient A is 1. How do you know it's 1? I don't see anything. Yeah, because that's 1. So, I mean, technically we did A times C yesterday, didn't we? Because yesterday every single A value was what? 1. Today, our A values just aren't 1, so we have to do A times C, so factors of A times C that have a sum of B. It's the same thing. Factors of A times C that have a sum of B. Just yesterday, A times C, A was always 1. Malachi, quiet, please. Thank you. Then we're going to fill in the box. Or the grid. And factor down and across. Fill in the grid and factor down and across. So we're factoring the columns, which are vertical, and we're factoring the rows, which are horizontal. We're ungridding. Right? Remember when we learned the grid, you took the numbers on the outside and multiplied to get the numbers inside? Now we have numbers inside, so we're going to multiply out, or divide out, factor out. All right, so let's try 1. 2x squared plus 11x plus 15. 2x squared plus 11x plus 15. So that's our problem. Oops, that says 5, not 15. It is 5. 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. Sorry, my bad. All right, so let's organize our thought process. What's A times C? What? 10. So I'm looking for factors of 10x squared that have a sum of B. What's my B value? 11x. Again, this is just sheer organization. So what factors of 10x squared, what times what equals 10x squared, but when you add them together, you get 11x. 1 what? 1x and 10x, correct? So I filled in my x. I've got my factors. I figured the math out. Now let's put it in our grid. I always put ax squared right here, 2x squared. I always put c right here, 5. And in my 2 blanks, I'm going to put my factors. It does not matter which one goes which place. It does not matter which one goes which place. 1x and 10x. If you put 10x here and 1x here, you're going to get the same answer. And now I'm going to factor across and down. What do 2x squared and 1x have in common? They have an x in common. What do 10x and 5 have in common? What? 5? What do 2x squared and 10x have in common? 2x. And what do 1x and 5 have in common? 1. And ladies and gentlemen, here's my binomial and here's my binomial. The solution to this problem is 2x plus 1, because that's a positive 1. Do you agree? And x minus 5. And I just factored that trinomial. Lucy. Oops, it's not minus 5. It's plus 5. Last piece of advice before we practice. If both factors are negative, both binomials are minus. If both factors are negative, both binomials are minus. All right, we're going to do a couple practice problems and then we are done. All right, let's try that one. 15x squared plus 4x minus 3. 15x squared plus 4x minus 3. The x is just to organize you. Could you figure out the factors without drawing the x? Yes. It's just an organizational tool that can be helpful. So a times c, what's 15x squared times negative 3? Negative 25x squared? 45. And my b value is 4x. So I'm looking for factors of negative 45. What times what equals negative 45? If it's a negative product, that means one is positive, one is negative. They have a sum of 4. What times what equals negative 45, but when I add them together, I get positive 4. Ariana? Negative 5x and positive 9x. I agree. Now I'm going to fill in my box. I always put ax squared here, so 15x squared. I always put my c value here, which is negative 3. And then in these two diagonals, I put my factors. Does it matter which order they go in? What one should I put on top? Negative 5x. So this one's 9x. Now I'm going to factor across and down. What do 15x squared and negative 5x share? What's their greatest common factor? Gabe?
3x.
More than 3x. 5x. You factored it and got 3x. They share 5x. What do 9x and negative 3 share? 3. Now I factor down. What do 15x squared and 9x share? 3x. And what do negative 5x and negative 3 share? They share a negative 1. So the solution, the factored answer, is 3x minus 1 and 5x plus 3. Or you could write it the other way, 5x plus 3 and 3x minus 1. What property tells us that we can flip-flop those two? Commutative property of multiplication. Order doesn't matter. All right, let's try another one. 4x squared minus 9x plus 5. 4x squared minus 9x plus 5. Again, drawing that x is organizational. It has no mathematical part to it. It's just to organize you. If there is an a value, or even if there's not an a value, right? Because if there's no a value, it's 1. So a times c. A times c, factors. We look for factors of a times c. Factors of a times c. What is a times c? 20x squared. And what's my b value? Negative 9x. What times what equals 20x squared? So I have a positive product. So a positive product, there are two ways to get it. Two ways to get a positive product are a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. What times what equals 20, but what plus what equals negative 9? Sam? Negative 5x and negative 4x, right? Those are my factors. Top left corner is always 4x squared. Bottom right corner is 5. Well, not always the same numbers, right? ax squared and c. And then my factors go in the diagonals. Do you notice anything about my factors? My factors are both what?
Negative.
So that means it's on the bottom of the first page of notes. Both problems are going to be minus. Even if you factor them and they're positive, both problems are going to be minus. Here we go. What do 4x squared and negative 5x share? Just an x. What do negative 4x and 5 share? Just a 1, right? What do 4x squared and negative 4x share? 4x. What do negative 5x and 5 share? 5. But since both factors were negative, both these problems will be minus. 4x minus 5 and x minus 1. Because here's why. Negative 5 times negative 1 makes what? Negative 5 times negative 1 makes what? Positive 5, right? And negative 4x and negative 5x make negative 9. One more? have to factor. (18x squared plus 3x minus 3). We haven't done one of these yet. Let's look. We've been neglecting our first rule every single time. What's the first thing we should do every single time? We should always look for GCF first. I've been neglecting that. Sorry. Do 18, 3, and 3 have a greatest common factor? 18, 3, and 3. 18, 3, and 3 can all be divided by 3. So let's factor out that 3. (18 divided by 3 is, with an x squared at the end. 3x divided by 3 is 1x. And negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. All right, there we go. You can either factor at the beginning or factor at the end. Here's the deal. If you factor at the beginning, your numbers are smaller to work with, right? If you factor at the end, I mean, I guess that's okay. But you're going to have to work with bigger numbers. Factors of A times C that have a sum of B. What is A times C? Negative 6x squared. What is B? 1x. What times what equals negative 6x squared? What times what equals negative 6, but has a sum of 1? I know that I'm multiplying to get a negative value. When you multiply to get a negative value, there's only one way to get a negative value. That is a positive times a negative. So what combination of numbers multiply together make negative 6, but when you add them together, make positive 1? What combination, what times what makes negative 6? Look at your factor squares. How do you get negative 6 but get positive 1, Zoe? Negative 2 and positive 3. Perfect. Negative 2 and positive 3. Negative 2x, positive 3x. Then I'm going to fill in my box. AX always goes right here. My AX was 6x squared. My C always goes down here, which is negative 1. And my factors are negative 2x and positive 3x. Factor horizontally and factor vertically. This is not. Yes. Okay. Bye. Factor vertically, factor horizontally. See if you can do it. Factor vertically, factor horizontally. All right, what do 6x squared and negative 2x share? They share 2x. What do 3x and negative 1 share? 1. What do 6x squared and 3x share?
3x.
And what do negative 2x and negative 1 share?
Negative 1.
So my solution, my factored answer is 3x minus 1 and 2x plus 1. Yes? No.
Oh, 3.
With a greatest common factor of 3. Don't forget that GCF. Yes, ma'am.
How did we get negative 1 in the group?
Because both are negative. So remember, if they're both negative, we factor out a negative. And 2x and 1, the only number that they share is 1. Questions?